Good morning, Year 6. It's Mr. Nicholson here. Hope you've had a lovely half-term holiday and you're back for another week of remote learning. So pause the video here, please, and write the date and title into your English books. So it's Monday, the 22nd of February. The title of today's lesson is The Reasons for Evacuation, and there's no Wilf needed today. Okay, a couple of minutes to do that and then come back to the video. Okay, everybody, so today we're going to look at the reasons behind evacuation. You might notice that our writing has changed topics because now we're writing about World War II, as World War II is our topic for this term, and all your your history lessons will be about World War II now. So Great Britain went to war against Germany on the 3rd of September in 1939, and Germany had just invaded Poland. And from September 1940, air raids began. German planes started to bomb British cities, and the bombs were very dangerous. They destroyed lots of homes, and unfortunately thousands of people were killed. So evacuation took place, and this was where thousands of city children were sent to safe places in the countryside. And what we're going to do for the first English lesson of the term is we're going to look at why that happened, what the process was all about, how it happened, and just get a bit of background information all about evacuation. Okay, let's move on. So our learning powers today are making links and absorption. I've chosen absorption because we're going to I'm going to send a link for a video for you to watch this morning, and I want you to concentrate and focus on it really well so that you can answer some questions. Okay, so here is the link for a video that I'd like you to watch. It's a montage, so it's a bit like a slideshow of photographs of children being evacuated in World War II. And every now and again, information comes up on the screen. It's not actors, it's just photos and information, so you might need to pause the video every now and again. I'll make sure this link is sent on the links page with all the lessons for today. And I'd like you to try and answer these questions. So this video will give you lots of background information about the evacuation process. So every now and again you might need to pause if these answers come up. I've checked the video and I've watched it before, so I know that all this information is in there. So by watching this video, I'd like you to find out who was evacuated and why, on which day the evacuation took place, how many of the evacuees travelled, what did the children take with them? Did every children take those things? Who went with the children? What happened to the children when they arrived at their destination? Who was it that found homes for the children? What problems did some children have? And what did some children enjoy about being evacuated? And what was happening by Christmas time in 1939? As I said, I'm pretty sure you can answer all of those questions by watching this video here. But if you want to do some further research on evacuation this morning, you've got an hour for English this morning, you could go on to any online websites and try and find out the answers from different sources if you want to. Okay, so I want you to pause my YouTube video here, open up the link to this video all about evacuation, and try and answer these questions, and then come back to the video when you're ready with me, and there's a couple more activities we'll do later on. Okay, so I'll speak to you a bit later. Okay, welcome back everybody. I hope you had a good try at answering those questions and you managed to open that video and do a little bit of research about the evacuation process. So, as you know now, it was a process where thousands of children were taken to the countryside for reasons of safety at the beginning of World War II. And I've got some factors here on the board that you can see. And what I'd like you to do is draw a table in your English book where one side of the table is for, so reasons for evacuation, reasons that evacuation should take place. And on the other side of the table, I'd like you to write the title against, and I'd like you to find on this page factors that were against evacuation or reasons that the evacuation should not take place. And I basically want you to sort these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, these 9 factors into whether they're a reason for evacuation or whether they're a reason against evacuation. So pause the video here, have a go at that activity, and then further on in the video I'll show you where you should have put the factors, and I'll explain a little bit more about them for you. Okay, good luck with that. Okay, so let's have a look at where I would have put these reasons. Here I've sorted them out for you. So first of all, I'll go through the reasons for evacuation, reasons that explain why evacuation was a really, really good idea. Now, first of all, children were taken to a place of safety. So at the start of the war, they thought that the cities would be very dangerous because they knew that the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, had the ability to drop bombs on the big cities. And they thought, rightly so, that the countryside would be a much safer place for children. So they decided to transport thousands of children to this safer place so that less children would be injured or unfortunately would die. Secondly, children would be well nourished. So moving to the countryside would be really good for their growth, really good for their health. They'd have better food, especially if they moved to somewhere where there were lots of farms. And it'd be a really good chance for poor people, poor children, to go somewhere and live well and eat well for a few years. Okay, children got to see new places. Many of the evacuees were from very poor inner city areas. They wouldn't have left their cities very often, if at all. So they got to actually see new places in the United Kingdom and got to experience a completely new way of life, and that would have been really, really great for many of them. Another positive reason would have been these children would have got new experiences. So as I mentioned before, they would have been to new places. They would have got to experience rural life, so life in the countryside, a much different way of life that they would have been used to in the inner cities in places like London, Birmingham and Manchester. And the final positive reason that I thought from that selection is that the children were able to make new friends. So live with new families and make new friends with the children in the countryside. But it wasn't all positive. Here are some reasons that I would have chosen as being against evacuation. So obviously it would have cost a lot of money. You would have had to have provided trains to transport all these children along with their teachers to the countryside. Houses would have needed to be found for these children, and foster families who took children in would have been paid for doing that. And on such a large scale, with such a large number of children being involved, it would have cost a lot of money. So an evacuation cost around £9 million, which was an awful lot of money back in 1939. And that money could have been spent on building thousands of warships and planes. So there was a bit of a decision to make, really, about the costs. And that would have put some people off doing evacuation at the beginning. Second thing was that children would have been almost as safe if they went to the shelters. So, for example, in London, they used the London Underground train system as huge shelters. And many people who were lucky enough to have gardens would have constructed Anderson shelters in their gardens. And it actually turned out that children would have been just as safe if they were able to go to these shelters. So at the start of the war, they predicted that 10,000 people might die during each raid, but the numbers were nowhere near as huge as that, fortunately, because the Germans were at one point in the war were bombing London almost daily for months on end. So if that number had been right, it would have been a terrible loss of life. So the argument was, you can save this £9 million and you can actually be just as safe by taking the children to the air raid shelters in the cities rather than send them out to the countryside. Another factor, although I spoke earlier about the children being evacuated, getting new experiences, seeing new places and making new friends, it would have caused a lot of unhappiness because these children would have been separated from their families. And the war lasted for 5 years, and that's a long time to be apart from the people who love you most. So, these children were were very young, sometimes 5, 6 years old, up to about 12, 13, and being separated from your family for so long would have been a very unhappy experience, and would have caused a lot of sadness. And the final one that I would have put in the against section was that, and not every time, but in many cases, the foster families did not care for the evacuees. So they were only doing it because they were getting paid by the government. They didn't particularly want children staying in their house. And because the foster families didn't care for the evacuees, some of the children, unfortunately, were treated very badly, and didn't have a very positive experience. But again, that wouldn't have been all of them. That would have just been some children. As I said before, some children had a wonderful new life where they were well nourished and got to have lovely new experiences. Okay, so hopefully you agreed with me and you put 5 of the factors in the for section and 4 of the factors in the against section. What you could do is just tick the ones that you put in the right place, so that when you send your photos into your teachers, they can see how you did with that activity. And I'm just going to move on to one final thing now for this Monday morning. And I want you to have a real think about this. So World War II was quite a long time ago now. As I said, it started on the 3rd of September 1939. So we're talking about approximately 80 years ago. And as it's such a long time, there aren't many evacuees left now, because if you imagine if you were 10 during the evacuation and that was 80 years ago, you'd be 90 now, which is quite an old age. So this is definitely an if question. But if you could meet an evacuee, and if you could get to talk to someone who was actually evacuated in World War II, what questions would you like to ask them? So have a little think about that, if you were able to have that opportunity. And underneath the table that you just did in your English book, I'd like you to write down 3 or 4 questions that you would like to ask an evacuee if you ever had the chance to meet one of them. Okay? Okay, and that's the last thing I'd like you to do for this English lesson. So a bit of a background information, just getting aware of the evacuation process. And we're going to take this on a little bit further during the rest of the week. So tomorrow we'll actually write a formal report about evacuation, and exactly what happened. And then later on in the week, on Thursday and Friday, we're going to write some letters where we imagine that we are an evacuee child writing home. Okay, so hope you've enjoyed that. It's probably your first lesson for a while, as we've just been on half term. And I'll speak to you again soon. Enjoy the rest of your day, Year 6. Goodbye.